Hi, thanks for joining me for my second book review. If you've seen the first one, I hope you enjoyed it. If not, it's on the channel. It's of Oscar Wilde's A Picture of Dorian Gray. So check it out if you've read that book or just want to hear my thoughts on it. Maybe you're thinking about reading it, but it does include some spoilers, and as will this one, I'd imagine. This review is of Ernest Hemingway's Fiesta, The Sun Also Rises. This is the book here. The reason why I chose to read it is a mixture of two reasons, really. Hemingway's always kind of interested me, mainly because the only author actually that I really ever had a fascination with was Hunter S. Thompson. And Hunter S. Thompson spoke very highly of Hemingway. So naturally I had an interest in Hemingway. I did read A Farewell to Arms. Well, I say I read. I probably read about half of A Farewell to Arms when I was younger, probably during about the time I was 17, 18. I didn't enjoy it too much, which is why I only read half of it. And I was also younger, and probably my attention span was a little off, and I wasn't quite as good at following through with things. But I didn't really enjoy it. I can't really pinpoint why. I think just the general tone of the book was unenjoyable, in a sense that it was just it was set in a war and a hospital, and it wasn't a pleasant world to immerse yourself in, and I struggle with that. This is something that I really enjoyed about Fiesta. I'll get into that, but it's a much more pleasant environment to sort of become a part of as you're reading it and indulge in. The other reason why this book particularly interested me to read was that I'd read a little of it previously when I was in university, in Swansea University. I studied history, but it was sort of a weird joint honours degree, and it involved some literature modules. So one of those modules actually involved this book, and I wrote an essay on this book. I wrote an essay on this book without reading it. I must have read about 3 or 4 chapters of it when I wrote the essay on it. It says a lot about my personality, I think, that I didn't read the book when I was required to read it and write an essay on it, and then years later, when I have no reason at all, it does not benefit me to read this book. It's nothing to do with my job, nothing to do with my career. I don't know anybody else who's even read it. There's no reason why I should read it. Now I go and read it and spend time thinking about it to produce this video. That's just, I'm sure a therapist could really read a lot into that. But yeah, that was another reason why it interested me, because I didn't not enjoy the bit of it I read when I was in university. I just didn't, I wasn't in a place where I was looking to read. I was sort of just drinking, you know how it is in university. I wasn't very motivated by much at that point in my life, so I didn't pay too much attention to it. Although I did remember sort of being slightly intrigued by it at the time. So I revisited it, and it's interesting. Like, I remember quite a lot of the essay I wrote about it. So it was interesting to come back and now read the book, and just to see, I knew it was going to be a bad essay, but just to see how misguided the essay that I wrote must have been. I might try to find it, because that would be particularly enjoyable, I think, if I have it somewhere on an old laptop or something. I remember I wrote the sort of primary thesis of my essay was that the book was all about escapism. I think I read sort of the opening chapters, and how Robert Cohn in the opening chapters is talking about getting away to South America, and how he felt that way about Paris before, and this sort of so I sort of just took that and ran with it, and this idea that they were Americans, they were traveling and trying to escape from their dissatisfaction in their lives, and trying to find it into a place that was exotic and they have yet to be, which definitely does exist in the book. I'm fairly certain that is what Robert Cohn was trying to do and thinking of when he was talking to Jake about moving to South America. But it's just a small part of the book. It's not. I literally just, in this essay, I must have encapsulated the entire book is just this, and I don't think it was one of my better essays marks wise, and it shouldn't have been. But yeah, that was quite fascinating. I definitely touched upon an aspect of the book, but it was flawed and incomplete, which makes sense because my reading of the book was very much flawed and incomplete. I'm thrilled that I did decide to come back to it though, because I love this book. If I, in sort of comparison to The Picture of Dorian Gray, which I think I was sort of neutral on, this, I really enjoyed reading it. It was one of those ones where if I decided I was going to do some reading, it was a part of the day that I looked forward to. I would go over to the Waterstones in Doncaster and read there. It's a lovely Waterstones. You've got a cafe with big windows across the one side of the cafe, and then you've got Doncaster's cathedral. And at the moment it's autumn, you've got the trees in front of the cathedral, really colourful. Just such a nice part of my day, just going there and reading. So I loved it. And it was one of those, I got to sort of the second half of the book, I became conscious of, oh no, this is going to end. I really enjoyed it. And I think the main reason why I really enjoyed it is because it is set in, southern France and Spain. And these people are living nice lives, essentially, They go into festivals and they're drinking, they're eating, they're meeting people, they're fishing. So they're living nice lives. So it is sort of in contrast to A Farewell to Arms, where it's not a very nice, what's going on in the book isn't very nice. This sounds great. I would love to live this life, sort of thing. So I just enjoyed being in it. I loved the it kind of calmed me down as well, the book. And I think the reason why it calmed me down is that Jake is the main character. Jake, he's such a he processes everything that's happening around him, and each day with such a sort of slowness and a calm, and whether something upsets him or he's looking forward to something, it doesn't really seem to affect his actions a whole bunch. And if he does something that's maybe not the best idea, he's kind of aware of it but doesn't get too upset by it. He sort of just understands his personality. And just sort of, I really took, that's the main thing I think I took from the book, was that, and just trying to implement a bit more of that in myself, and just understanding the moment, appreciating the moment, and whatever the moment is, just being a part of it and enjoying it. That really was the value I took from a book. I don't know how much intention there is in that, but that's personally what I took from a book in terms of value. The only other sort of values I saw in the book, I think, was Robert Cohn. Robert Cohn, I'd compare him to another book that I will probably do a review on soon, which is a book I read relatively recently, which is Ayn Rand, The Fountainhead. I know that can be quite a controversial political book. I don't really want to go down that road, but it is a book I read, so I will do a review on it and just try to review a book rather than Ayn Rand. But there's a character in that, Peter Keating, who is he's a successful guy in terms of career, and not really in romance, but ostensibly from the outside he would be in romance at certain periods of the book as well. But no matter what happens in Peter Keating's life, you don't like him, you don't feel any sense of accomplishment, you don't look up to him, you don't admire him at all. And Robert Cohn has that same personality, same sort of feature, in that it's funny because Jake's impotent and is in love with this girl. Robert Cohn is like this tough boxer dude, gets the girl, and even before that backfires on him, and it just looks like he's got a girl, you still don't feel bad for Jake. You feel bad for Robert even in those moments, which is bizarre because he's seemingly the winner and Jake's the loser and the sort of guy who's maybe being sort of like alpha males. But even during those moments, Jake feels like the alpha male, and you'd much rather be Jake still than Robert Cohn in those moments. I find that fascinating. It could just be because you're reading the book from Jake's perspective, and that's the bias involved in that. You sort of, because if I'm reading it and Jake's telling me the story, Jake's the center of the world, isn't he? So he's the only thing that really matters. I'm living, this universe only exists through Jake, so maybe Jake's always going to seem like the most important sort of character in a sense, but I think there's more to it than that. I think it's clear that Robert Cohn doesn't really have any sense of self and self-esteem or self-respect, really. And I think that's why. It doesn't matter if he gets a girl, it doesn't matter who he knocks out. He doesn't have that sense of self and sense of self-esteem, and because of that, he's just undignified and he's not comfortable to be around, and he's just not an enjoyable character, not someone you root for. So that's the value I think I took in that sort of from the book there. I find it hard to take much from Brett and the way she behaves and her sort of story arc and her and Jake's sort of thing. I get the idea of it, you know. I get that Jake's madly in love with her, and she seems somewhat in love with Jake. I think Jake's impotence is probably the hurdle in that relationship ever becoming anything. They're both pretty resigned to the fact that it can't. There's definitely a suggestion that like Brett's personality is another reason why, but there's no, I don't know, maybe I missed it and I just forgot about it. I didn't really see any reason why Brett is the way she is, and it's not, I don't know. There definitely seems to be some form of deep sorrow involved when you think about the tone of how Brett felt just before she met the bullfighter, Pedro Romero. There was definitely a deep sadness there that Jake seemed to understand, which is why he was sort of happy to almost facilitate that meeting. But I'm not sure where it comes from. There was actually, I'm being ignorant here, there was definitely a moment in the book that explained a past relationship or something of Brett's, but she definitely seems somewhat scarred. But I couldn't take a whole lot from the love story between her and Jake. I sort of enjoyed it just from it's kind of cool how Jake sort of like the one that seems to hold weight with her throughout. But I don't know. I'll have to revisit what the thing with Brett was, because I have forgot that. That sort of caused her to be somewhat impulsive. It wasn't a part of the book that captured my mind a whole lot, as you can probably tell, because I'm just talking around it and not really saying anything. So I'm probably best off saying nothing at all about it if I have nothing of value to add. Just a reminder again, I don't read anything before these. I don't read anyone's breakdown or anything. This is all my views, and this is why sometimes I've got nothing. And other times I've got something I might be interested in, and other times I've got something that might be straight up weird. That might be more times than I prefer. My favourite thing about this book, I love comedy. I'm a great comedy fan. I love stand-up comedy. And I find this book hilarious. There were certain points. I'm just going to try to find the pages now. There was page 64. The comedy in it, I don't even know how intentional the comedy was. But it tickled me. I think it was pretty intentional. The reason why I'm not sure if it's intentional, because it's an old book. I mean, I'm not sure, I can't remember when it was written now, but this is an old book. Yet the comedy, like, it holds up perfectly today, and it's almost like modern comedy. I don't know how he managed to pull it off, but yeah. So there was 2 pages I found particularly funny. One of them was it was sort of Bill's introduction. Bill's great. I love Bill as a character. He's a very comfortable guy. He's sort of he's a guy that you want as a friend. I think Bill. He's fun, comfortable. He's just a top bloke. And it's when Bill is trying to get Jake to buy a stuffed dog. It's page 64, 65 of this edition, but it's when I think it's at the start of book 2 in it, and it's when Bill's just like he's a taxidermist, Bill is, and he's trying to get Jake to buy a stuffed dog, and he just keeps going back to stuffed dogs over. It's like for 2 pages, the conversation goes off elsewhere. And Bill just keeps on coming back to the stuffed dog. It's like a Family Guy bit where they just keep coming back to the same joke. And it wasn't funny at the start, but by the end of it, it's hilarious to me. And it just instantly endears you to Bill as a character. But yeah, I find that really funny. I also, just slightly off topic, taxidermy as a word in English language. I don't know if there's another word that sounds less like what it is than taxidermy. Maybe it's a British thing, because here a taxi is a cab, a taxi as in a cab, and taxidermy are not at all related. Maybe that's what throws me off so much. But usually, no matter what the word is, if you attach it to a certain thing, a certain concept, a certain object, you say it enough, it starts to make sense as the only word you could ever attach to that thing. Taxidermy, no matter how many times I hear it, will never achieve that to me. I'm just like, that's what that's called? I almost forget all the time what it's called because it makes no sense to me whatsoever. Going on to the comedy of a book again, page 101, I think, I actually sort of started laughing out loud. And this is part of the comedy, is also it's quite vulgar. Again, because of the time, there's some slurs used in here. I think there might be a slur in this expert that I'm going to read out, and I might just I might just change that slightly so I don't get like YouTube algorithmed off. Even though I'd usually just say it when quoting, but I don't want to get kicked off or anything. But I find it so funny. I'll read it now. So it's on page 101. And I think it's Mike who says it. Let me just have a look. Bill said, you're a hell of a guy. Anybody ever tell you were a good guy? I'm not a good guy. Well, I think it was Bill actually again. So Bill brings a comedy here. And I think he's telling someone they're a good guy. It was either Mike or Jake because Bill was fond of both of them. I hope I'm not getting that wrong. But let me just read this quote out to you. Listen, you're a hell of a guy, and I'm fonder of you than anybody on earth. I couldn't tell you that in New York. It'd mean I was a fuggot. That was what the Civil War was about. Abraham Lincoln was a fuggot. He was in love with General Grant. So was Jefferson Davis. Lincoln just freed the slaves on a bet. The Dred Scott case was framed by the Anti-Saloon League. Sex explains it all. And he goes on, but that's the most random thing. It's like a Norm Macdonald joke is the first thing it made me think of. R.I.P. Norm Macdonald. But it's vulgar, it's quite offensive. And it's just, but it's offensive, but it's ridiculous, so it's not offensive. But there's also like this sense of like, I think he might believe it. He might be screwing with me, but he also might believe it. It was so imaginative. I find that really funny. So yeah, there's a few moments like that in the book that just made me smile because I find them very funny. What else did I take away from a book? There was in that essay I wrote in university, I said there was a shift in tone. Because I scanned the rest of the book. I didn't read it, but I scanned like the second half of the book when I wrote that essay. I said there's a shift in tone from France to Spain. Everyone seemed much happier in Spain than they did in France. And now I've read the book, that seems like total nonsense to me. But what I will say, whilst they were in Paris, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the setting of it. It did make me a little bit more intrigued of Paris. You know, you read a book like this and you understand why Americans, and I think British people do, just Westerners, have a really romantic view of Europe and Paris, probably more than anywhere else. And it is because of books like this, I'm sure, that I think there's other books as well, and I plan to read a few of those in the near future. But yeah, it just really gives a romantic view of Europe, and particularly the Fiesta. There was one point in this book where I started like Googling how much hotels cost in Pamplona around the time of a Fiesta. I know, obviously, Hemingway is a great bullfighting fan. That's seen hugely in this book, and bullfighting has become controversial to say the least today. I've seen some videos on YouTube and it does look a bit gross to me, to be honest. I don't really want to watch a bullfight, but the Fiesta as a whole, just the general atmosphere, even the running of the bulls in itself doesn't seem to be too cruel. But yeah, the bullfighting probably should be stopped. But yeah, it did make me want to go to Fiesta. Just like the people there, it just seems like a fun atmosphere, minus any animal cruelty that unfortunately may take place. Obviously, that is one place where the book has dated, I suppose, blood sports. Not too popular these days. So yeah, I really enjoyed the book. One thing I did notice as well was, like I said, it was just a nice world to indulge yourself in. They were all just drinking constantly. None of these people seem to work. They all seem to have endless amounts of money, apart from Mike, who's bankrupt. And they're just drinking and relaxing. There's conflicts, but what I find weird is that they live in this life of no productivity. All right, only for this short period of time. I'm sure they do work, but it seems to be mostly a lack of productivity in their life. They're very relaxed. They're very much just enjoying the day. And there's no sort of underlying sense of struggles with meaning and lack of productivity, and a purpose in their life. There's no struggles in that. And I find that for the amount of time that Jake, we're hearing all of Jake's inner monologue. And the amount of time he spends sort of just like drinking with friends and not really doing that much, I find it kind of weird that there's no struggles with those sort of ideas. I'm not sure how realistic that is. I don't know if that's another thing that I can take from Jake and try to implement in my own life. I know I would struggle with that stuff if this was me. But yeah, he doesn't. I'm not sure if that's just the book being unrealistic. I'm not sure if that's a change in the times, or if it's just a personality thing. But yeah, that was the other thing I really took away from the book. But overall, just loved reading it. So glad I came back to it. I'll probably read more. I don't think I'll revisit A Farewell to Arms, because I just don't like the atmosphere and the environment of that book. But I'll probably read more Hemingway now. I've definitely become a little bit more intrigued than I was even of Hemingway. I'm glad that I've recorded this now, so I can actually Google a little bit more about this book, watch some videos, and find out a little bit more information. I just wanted to capture my first-hand sort of review in this video first. So loved it, highly recommend. It's just a really enjoyable book. And yeah, I'm excited to see more of Hemingway. I will have a couple videos coming up. The next book I'm going to read just started. It's another book that I wrote an essay on in university and didn't finish, didn't read it all, so I'm going to just get all those done. That's Mark Twain, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I look over there because the book is literally residing over there in my room. I started earlier. I enjoyed the first sort of opening to it, so I think I can get into a stride of that book now. So that's the next book I'm going to read. Before then, though, because it might take me a while to read that now, I've got 2 videos that I expect to come out before then. One might be Ayn Rand, The Fountainhead. I did read that relatively recently, although it took me a long time to read it. So that one might come out soon. And I think I'm going to do a video talking about Hunter S. Thompson, not a Hunter S. Thompson book specifically. I hope to do that at some point, but it's been a long time since I read any Hunter S. Thompson books. But he is, like I say, the author that really fascinated me towards reading before anyone else. So I should at least just get a general Hunter S. Thompson video out there, because it might be a while before I choose to revisit one of those books and read them, so I have them fresh enough in my memory to do a video on them. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this book. If you haven't read it yet, definitely advise you go read it. And yeah, share any thoughts with me you have about a book in the comments section. Like, subscribe if you'd like to see more of these videos, and thank you for listening.